Sarah Elena Martinez had no idea that at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a gray Tuesday afternoon in Austin, Texas, her entire destiny would pivot on what appeared to be the most devastating rejection of her life. As she clicked open the email from Pinnacle Ventures, the words on her laptop screen blurred through tears she refused to let fall. After careful consideration of your proposal, we have decided to pursue other investment opportunities that better align with our current portfolio strategy. Rejection number 47. What Sarah couldn't see was the invisible activity taking place in the spiritual realm around her small apartment. Angels were positioning themselves for what would soon unfold as one of the most remarkable demonstrations of divine timing that heaven had orchestrated in years. The same God who had opened the Red Sea for Moses, who had caused prison gates to swing wide for Peter, this same God was about to prove once again that closed doors cannot stop his plans for those he loves. The apartment itself told the story of her journey. What had once been a comfortable space for a successful freelance web designer had gradually transformed into something resembling a war room. Whiteboards covered with user flow diagrams occupied every wall. Stacks of market research reports created mountains on her dining table, and everywhere on her desk, in manila folders, stuffed into a shoebox under her bed, were the printed copies of rejection letters that she somehow couldn't bring herself to throw away. 47 attempts to convince someone that her vision was worth investing in. 47 opportunities to explain how her app could bridge the devastating digital divide, isolating millions of elderly Americans from their families. 47 chances to share her passion for solving a problem that affected every person who had ever watched a grandparent struggle with technology. And 47 doors that had slammed shut with absolute finality. What Sarah didn't understand yet is that heaven operates on a timing system that often appears to conflict with our earthly urgency. The same God who told Abraham he would become the father of many nations, then waited 25 years to give him Isaac, was orchestrating events in Sarah's life with precision she couldn't yet comprehend. To understand what was about to unfold, we need to travel back 3 years earlier to a small assisted living facility in San Antonio, where an 82-year-old woman named Carmen Elena Martinez was experiencing her own season of closed doors. Abuela Carmen had always been the technological pioneer in their family. She was the first to master the VCR, the first to figure out the microwave timer. Carmen approached new technology with the fearless curiosity that had carried her from a small village in Michoacan to Texas as a young bride, determined to build a better life for her family. But the pandemic changed everything. Suddenly, video calling had become essential for family connection. But to Carmen's aging eyes and arthritic fingers, her tablet might as well have been rocket science. Sarah would drive 2 hours from Austin to San Antonio every weekend during those early pandemic months, sitting 6 feet away from her grandmother in the facility's courtyard, trying to teach her how to navigate apps, passwords, and touch screens that everyone else seemed to master effortlessly. Maya, Carmen would say, her voice heavy with frustration. After another failed video call attempt, I feel like the world moved on without me. All I want is to see my great-grandchildren grow up. But this machine makes me feel stupid. It was during one of these patient teaching sessions that Sarah experienced what she would later recognize as a divine download. One of those moments when an idea arrives fully formed, as if it had been waiting somewhere in the universe for exactly the right person at exactly the right time to receive it. What if technology could be designed specifically for people like her grandmother? What if there was a way to create a bridge between the analog generation and the digital world that honored their wisdom while gently guiding them through the technological landscape they needed to navigate? The app idea forming in Sarah's mind wasn't just about technical support. It was about human connection. She envisioned a platform that would pair tech-savvy volunteers with seniors who needed assistance, creating relationships that went beyond troubleshooting to provide genuine companionship and understanding. As Sarah spent more time in the assisted living facility, she began to realize that her grandmother's struggles were universal. She met Robert, an 85-year-old retired engineer who had helped design early computer systems but now felt overwhelmed by his smartphone. There was Margaret, a former teacher who couldn't figure out how to order groceries online. And Thomas, a veteran who had mastered complex military technology but was now isolated from his family because video calling seemed impossibly complicated. Each encounter added new layers to Sarah's understanding. This wasn't just about technology. It was about dignity, independence, and the fundamental human need for connection. The digital divide wasn't just inconvenient for seniors, it was literally cutting them off from the world they had helped build. The breakthrough moment came when Carmen successfully video called her great-granddaughter in California without any assistance. The joy on both their faces as they waved at each other through the screen was worth more than any market research could have provided. Sarah knew she had found her life's work. What Sarah hadn't anticipated was how the very qualities that made her app revolutionary would also make it nearly impossible to fund through traditional venture capital channels. The investment world operated on metrics and models that didn't account for the patient, relationship-based approach her platform required. Her first investor meeting was with TechStart Ventures. Sarah had spent weeks preparing her presentation, researching their portfolio, and crafting a pitch she was certain would resonate with their mission of backing innovative solutions. "It's a nice concept," the lead partner said when she finished, "but we're not seeing a clear path to the kind of scale we need. The senior market is notoriously difficult to monetize." Rejection number 1 arrived via email 2 days later. Polite, but firm. Innovation Partners was more direct. Seniors don't adopt new technology quickly. And when they do, they don't pay premium prices. You're asking us to invest in customer support for people resistant to change. Where's the viral growth component? Meridian Capital kept her hopes alive for 3 months. They seemed genuinely interested and assigned a junior associate to work with her on refining the business model. Sarah spent countless hours developing new projections, exploring partnerships, researching government contracts. The associate was encouraging, scheduling multiple meetings and asking detailed questions. Sarah began planning how to use the funding. The rejection, when it came, was particularly crushing because it arrived just as hope had been rekindled. After extensive analysis, we've determined that while your platform addresses a real need, the total addressable market isn't large enough to generate the returns our investors require. By rejection number 10, Sarah began questioning whether she was approaching the wrong investors. She started targeting firms focused on social impact, healthcare, technology, demographic-specific solutions. Silverbridge Capital seemed promising. Their managing partner, Janet Morrison, had a background in gerontology and seemed to genuinely grasp the importance of Sarah's work. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we need," Janet told her. "The senior market is massively underserved, and your approach of combining technology with human connection is brilliant." Sarah spent 6 weeks developing everything they requested: detailed projections, user research, comprehensive go-to-market strategy. The follow-up meetings went well. Janet introduced Sarah to other partners, arranged calls with portfolio CEOs, even suggested potential pilot customers. 3 months later, the rejection came via phone call. Sarah, this decision was incredibly difficult. Your platform is exactly what the world needs. But our investment committee decided the customer education requirements create too much execution risk for the returns we need to generate. By rejection number 20, Sarah's confidence was eroding. She started second-guessing fundamental aspects of her business model. Maybe the investors were right. Maybe seniors weren't a viable market. Maybe she was being naive about customer acquisition challenges. She began modifying her pitch to address every investor concern. She explored enterprise sales models, focusing on senior living facilities rather than individual consumers. She developed healthcare partnerships. She even considered pivoting to serve broader demographics. But with each modification, Sarah felt herself moving further from the original vision that had inspired her. The app that had brought joy to her grandmother was becoming something generic, designed more to satisfy investor concerns than solve the real problem she had set out to address. The emotional toll was becoming as challenging as the financial pressure. Sarah had used up most of her savings during 3 years of development and fundraising. She was living on ramen noodles, had moved to a smaller apartment, and was taking freelance projects at night to cover expenses. More difficult than financial struggle was the growing sense of isolation and self-doubt. Friends and family, initially supportive, began suggesting it was time to look for a real job. Her parents, immigrants who had worked multiple jobs to provide stability, couldn't understand why she continued pursuing something that hadn't generated income in 3 years. Even Carmen began expressing concern about Sarah's situation. "I don't want to be the reason you struggle," she told Sarah. "Maybe God has a different plan for your life." But Sarah couldn't shake the conviction that this wasn't just a business idea, it was a calling. Every time she visited the facility and saw residents' frustration with technology, every time she heard about grandparents who had given up trying to video call family, she knew what she was building was desperately needed. The rejections continued. By rejection number 40, she had developed thick skin for feedback that had initially devastated her. She learned to read subtle signals indicating genuine interest versus politeness. "We love what you're doing," one managing partner told her after what seemed like a perfect presentation. "But we're concerned about timing. The senior market is still catching up to current technology. Maybe this idea is 5 years ahead of its time." 5 years ahead of its time. How many seniors would remain isolated during those 5 years? How many grandparents would miss watching their grandchildren grow up because video calling seemed too complicated? Rejections 41 through 46 arrived in quick succession, each one reinforcing the growing fear that maybe everyone else was right and she was simply too stubborn to accept reality. The morning after receiving rejection 47 from Pinnacle Ventures, Sarah woke up feeling something she hadn't experienced in years: the complete absence of hope. Not sadness, not frustration, not anger, just a gray, empty feeling that settled over her like a heavy blanket. The apartment around her felt like a monument to failure. The white boards that had once represented clarity now looked like chaotic scribbles of someone who had lost their way. The market research that had once filled her with confidence now seemed like evidence of naivety about business realities. For the first time since beginning this journey, Sarah allowed herself to seriously consider giving up, not temporarily stepping back, but actually abandoning the entire project. She could freelance full-time, save money, maybe find a corporate job with benefits and steady paycheck. She could stop disappointing her parents and herself with continued failure. Sarah opened her laptop and began composing an email to her handful of beta testers. She would thank them. Explain she was discontinuing the service. Recommend alternatives that might meet their needs. But as she typed the first sentence of what would effectively be her surrender letter, something stopped her. Not a voice, not a vision, just a simple, quiet, knowing that she was making this decision in her own strength rather than seeking wisdom from the one who had given her the vision in the first place. Sarah closed her laptop and did something she hadn't done since the earliest days of her journey. She prayed. Not desperate. Bargaining prayers she had offered during difficult investor meetings, but a simple, honest conversation with God about what she was supposed to do next. I don't understand what's happening, she said aloud in her empty apartment. I believed this was from you. I believed you wanted me to help people like Abuela Carmen, but every door has been closed. Every investor has said no, and I'm running out of everything. Money, energy, hope. If this is supposed to happen, you're going to have to make it happen, because I can't do it anymore. The prayer wasn't particularly eloquent. It was the prayer of someone who had reached the end of themselves and was finally ready to acknowledge that maybe their timing wasn't the same as God's timing. That maybe the very doors they were trying to force open were being kept closed for reasons they couldn't yet understand. What Sarah didn't know was that her prayer of surrender had just activated what spiritual teachers call supernatural favor, the kind of divine intervention that moves when human effort stops, that opens doors when human keys don't work. The breakthrough was already in motion, 3 days after Sarah's prayer of surrender. Her phone rang at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. The number wasn't in her contacts, and under normal circumstances, she might have let it go to voicemail. But something compelled her to answer. "Hello," she said tentatively. "Hello, dear." "Is this the app?" developer asked an elderly woman's voice. Clearly struggling with technology, Sarah's first instinct was to correct the misunderstanding. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number." "Oh my," the woman sighed. "I was trying to call tech support for my tablet, but I must have dialed incorrectly. These numbers are so small, and my eyes aren't what they used to be. I'm so sorry to bother you." In that moment, Sarah felt something shift in her spirit. Here was exactly the kind of person her app was designed to help. Instead of ending the call, she found herself saying, "Wait, don't hang up. What kind of help do you need? Maybe I can point you in the right direction." The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret, explained that she was the activities director at Sunset Manor, a retirement community in Austin. She had been tasked with helping residents stay connected with families through video calls. But many seniors were too intimidated by the technology to participate. We received a donation of tablets from a local foundation. Margaret continued. "Beautiful devices that could really help our residents, but most of them are afraid to even touch the screens. Yesterday, I spent 2 hours trying to help Mr. Peterson video call his grandson, and we never got the connection to work. He was so discouraged. As Margaret spoke, Sarah felt something awakening in her chest. Not just interest, but recognition. This wasn't a wrong number. This was a divine appointment. Margaret, Sarah said, her voice growing animated. I think I might be able to help you. I've actually developed an app specifically for this situation. It's designed to make technology more accessible for seniors. With larger buttons, simplified interfaces, and step-by-step guidance. What followed was a 3-hour conversation that would change both their lives. Margaret wasn't just an activities director. She was a former director of social services for Texas who had spent 35 years advocating for seniors. She had a master's in gerontology, extensive experience with federal aging programs, and a network throughout the senior services industry. More importantly, Margaret had been praying for a solution to the exact problem Sarah's app was designed to solve. Every night for the past 6 months, Margaret told Sarah, I've been asking God to send someone who could help our residents bridge this digital divide. When I dialed your number by mistake, well, now I don't think it was a mistake at all. Margaret explained that Sunset Manor housed 300 residents with an average age of 78. The majority had family in other cities, and the pandemic had made digital communication essential. But despite having tablets and internet, fewer than 30% used the devices regularly. Would you be willing to visit us? Margaret asked. I'd love for you to meet some residents and see if your app might help them. The next day, Sarah drove to Sunset Manor with her laptop and a tablet loaded with her app. Margaret had assembled 20 residents in the community room, all eager to learn but apprehensive about technology. Sarah spent the afternoon demonstrating her app, but more importantly, she listened to their stories. She heard about grandchildren they hadn't seen in months, family gatherings they could only hear about secondhand, the isolation that came from feeling left behind by digital communication. When she helped Robert successfully video call his grandson in California, watching his face light up as his great-granddaughter waved through the screen, Sarah knew she was witnessing more than a technology demonstration. She was seeing relationship restoration that had been strained by technological barriers. This is what I've been praying for, Dorothy whispered as she successfully sent her first text message. I thought I was too old to learn, but your app makes me feel capable instead of stupid. By afternoon's end, 18 of 20 residents had successfully completed video calls or sent messages. More importantly, they were helping each other, sharing discoveries, expressing excitement about staying connected with families. This is it, Margaret told Sarah. This is exactly what we needed. But Margaret's vision extended far beyond Sunset Manor. As former state director of social services, she understood the scope of technology isolation among seniors. You need to be at the Texas Senior Living Association conference next week, she told Sarah. I'm going to make some calls. What Sarah didn't know was that Margaret's calls would set in motion divine connections that no amount of traditional networking could have achieved. Margaret contacted her former colleague, Dr. Patricia Williams, now State Director of Aging Services. Dr. Williams was married to Jonathan Williams, a producer at ABC News who had been looking for positive stories about senior care innovation. Within 48 hours, Sarah received calls from conference organizers inviting her to present, from Dr. Williams requesting a demonstration for state officials, and from Jonathan Williams asking about featuring her story in a news segment. The convergence felt surreal to someone who had spent 3 years struggling to get anyone to pay attention. But more than that, each contact validated not just her business model, but her original calling to serve an overlooked population. As Sarah reflected on the rapid transformation of her circumstances, she couldn't help but think about biblical stories that echoed her experience. The pattern of closed doors, followed by sudden breakthrough. She thought about Peter, sitting in prison the night before his scheduled execution, chained between 2 guards with 16 soldiers preventing escape. The circumstances seemed impossible. Doors not just closed but heavily fortified. Yet Scripture tells us Peter slept peacefully, not resigned to his fate, but understanding that human security systems cannot override divine purposes. When the angel appeared, chains didn't just unlock, they fell off supernaturally. Door after door opened as Peter followed the angel until they reached the final barrier, an iron gate that opened of its own accord. No key, no force, no human intervention. Just sovereign power moving obstacles that seemed immovable. Sarah realized her 47 rejections had been like those prison doors, each seemingly secure, each apparently final, but none ultimately able to contain what God had purposed for her life. Margaret's phone call had been her iron gate opening of its own accord. She also thought about Hannah, who dealt with her own season of closed doors. For years, Hannah had been unable to have children while watching her husband's other wife bear child after child. Scripture specifically says the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, indicating that sometimes God himself closes doors for reasons we don't immediately understand. Hannah's story reminded Sarah that not every closed door is opposition or failure. Sometimes God closes doors to protect us, prepare us, or position us for something greater than we originally envisioned. Hannah eventually gave birth to Samuel, who became one of Israel's most significant prophets. Her season of closed doors hadn't been punishment. It had been preparation for purpose requiring divine timing. Similarly, Sarah began understanding that her 3 years of rejections hadn't been wasted time. Each investor meeting had refined her ability to articulate vision. Each rejection had forced her to strengthen her business model and deepen market understanding. Each month of financial struggle had taught efficient operation and focus on what truly mattered. Most importantly, the season of closed doors had kept her from partnerships that might have compromised her mission. Several investors had suggested modifications that would have shifted focus away from seniors toward more profitable demographics. Others wanted to eliminate the human support component central to her app's effectiveness. The story of Moses at the Red Sea provided another layer of understanding. When Israelites found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's army and impassable water, Moses told them, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." The instruction seemed counterintuitive when facing impossible circumstances. Natural response is action, finding solutions, keeping moving. But sometimes God requires us to stop striving and trust Him to make a way where there appears to be no way. Sarah's prayer of surrender had been her own stand-still moment. For 3 years, she had tried forcing doors open through networking, perfecting presentations, chasing investors. When she finally stopped trying to make things happen in her own strength and surrendered the outcome to God, she created space for Him to work in ways she never could have orchestrated. Perhaps most encouraging was Joseph's story. 13 years dealing with closed doors before stepping into his destiny. sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten by those he helped. Each setback seemed to move him further from the dreams God had given him as a young man. But every closed door in Joseph's story was actually preparation for the open door that would lead him to become second in command of Egypt. Skills learned managing Potiphar's household prepared him to manage a nation's resources. Years in prison connected him with people who would later open doors to Pharaoh's court. Sarah began seeing her own journey through this lens. Technical skills developed as a freelance designer had been essential for creating her app. Market research conducted during fundraising had given her deep insight into the senior services industry. Even financial struggles had taught her to operate lean and focus on genuine value, rather than flashy features that didn't serve users. What happened next demonstrated a fundamental principle when God opens a door. He frequently opens multiple doors simultaneously, creating what can only be described as supernatural acceleration. The Texas Senior Living Association Conference became the first domino in a sequence of events that unfolded with breathtaking speed. Sarah's presentation to senior living executives, state officials, and advocacy leaders wasn't just well received. It sparked a movement. Dr. Patricia Williams immediately saw potential for statewide implementation. This isn't just a nice technology tool, she told Sarah after the presentation. This could be a solution to one of the most pervasive problems in senior care. Digital isolation is contributing to depression, social withdrawal, even cognitive decline. Your app doesn't just connect people to technology, it connects them to life. Dr. Williams arranged for Sarah to present at the Texas Healthy Aging Summit, leading to pilot programs in 12 additional retirement communities, providing invaluable data about how her app performed across diverse populations. Meanwhile, Jonathan Williams was developing a feature story for ABC News. As he learned more about Sarah's journey and her app's impact, he realized this was a national story. The digital divide among seniors affects every community in America. He told Sarah, "Would you be comfortable if I pitched this to our national desk?" The ABC News feature aired on a Thursday evening in October, 3 months after Margaret's wrong number call. The 4-minute segment included interviews with Sunset Manor residents demonstrating the app, conversations with family members whose relationships had been restored, and experts discussing technology isolation among elderly Americans. Sarah watched from her apartment, surrounded by the same whiteboards and research reports that had represented failure months earlier, but now felt like evidence of persistence finally paying off. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Calls from retirement communities wanting to implement her app, journalists requesting interviews, technology companies inquiring about partnerships. But the most significant call came from Marcus Chen at Pinnacle Ventures, the same investor who had sent Rejection 47 just 4 months earlier. "Sarah," Marcus said, "I owe you a significant apology. I watched your story tonight, and I realize I completely missed the point when you presented earlier. I was so focused on traditional metrics that I failed to see the human impact of what you're building." Marcus explained that he had recently moved his grandfather into assisted living, where he witnessed firsthand the frustration and isolation of the digital divide. "When I saw your segment and heard those residents talking about reconnecting with families, I finally understood what you were trying to tell us." Marcus revealed that after passing on her deal, he had kept thinking about her presentation. "Something bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Now I realize it was conviction. I knew we had made a mistake." Marcus had spent months researching the senior technology market more thoroughly. visiting retirement communities, interviewing families, consulting gerontology experts. His conclusion was that Sarah's app addressed a market need both larger and more urgent than he had initially understood. I've also been working on something that could be transformative for your company, Marcos continued. I've been in discussions with Silverbridge Technologies about their senior-focused initiatives. They've been looking for exactly what you've developed, and they have infrastructure and market relationships to help you scale nationally. Silverbridge Technologies specialized in developing and distributing technology solutions for senior living communities, healthcare providers, and aging-in-place services. They had partnerships with over 2,000 retirement communities across 43 states and had been searching for an app that could help clients address digital inclusion challenges. We've tried to develop something like this internally, explained Jennifer Carter, Silverbridge's CEO, during a conference call, but we're hardware and infrastructure. What you've built, the user experience design, the patient support system, the way you've made complex technology feel approachable, that's not something we could replicate. We need to partner with you. Partnership discussions moved at a pace Sarah found almost disorienting after 3 years of slow rejections. Within 2 weeks, she had signed a letter of intent, providing immediate expansion funding, access to Silverbridge's distribution network, and technical support for scaling her platform to serve thousands of senior living communities. The most remarkable aspect was how the opportunity preserved everything essential to Sarah's original vision, while providing resources she never could have accessed independently. Silverbridge understood that the human support component wasn't a scalability problem to solve. It was the core value proposition making the technology effective. Within 6 months of Margaret's call, Sarah's app was being used in senior living communities across 15 states. The woman who had received 47 rejections was now fielding inquiries from organizations she had never heard of, speaking at conferences she had never imagined attending, watching her user base grow at rates exceeding her most optimistic projections. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came from seniors themselves. Letters and emails arrived daily from users sharing stories of reconnecting with estranged family members, successfully managing their own technology for the first time in years, regaining confidence in their ability to adapt and learn. Robert sent a handwritten note that Sarah framed. Dear Sarah, your app didn't just help me video call my grandson. It helped me believe I still have something valuable to contribute to my family's life. Thank you for not giving up on people like me. These testimonials reminded Sarah that success wasn't measured in funding rounds or user metrics. It was the restoration of relationships strained by technological barriers. The return of dignity to people who had felt left behind by digital progress. And proof that innovation could serve love rather than just profit. 2 years after Margaret's wrong number call, Sarah stood before 500 technology entrepreneurs at South by Southwest in Austin, sharing her story as part of a panel on technology for social impact. The conference center was 15 miles from the apartment where she had once sat, surrounded by rejection letters, questioning whether her vision had any validity. Her app was now used in over 800 senior living communities across 37 states. The platform had facilitated over 2 million successful technology interactions between seniors and families, with user satisfaction rates exceeding anything else in the senior technology market. More importantly, the app had become a model for what industry publications called dignity-centered technology design, an approach prioritizing user experience for underserved populations rather than just mainstream adoption. During the panel discussion, Another entrepreneur asked Sarah what advice she would give to founders facing repeated rejections and considering giving up on their visions. "I used to think closed doors meant I was on the wrong path," Sarah replied. "But I've learned that sometimes closed doors are protection from opportunities that would compromise your mission or rush you into situations you're not ready to handle. The question isn't whether you'll face rejection if you're working on something that matters. You probably will. The question is whether you can maintain faith in your calling when circumstances seem to contradict it." She paused, and thinking about Robert and Dorothy and all the other seniors who had reminded her why her work mattered during moments when investors couldn't see its value. "I also learned that the right opportunity often comes through channels you never would have considered. My breakthrough came through a wrong number phone call, not through a perfectly crafted pitch deck. Sometimes you have to stop trying to force doors open and trust that the right doors will open at the right time." After the panel, Sarah was approached by a young entrepreneur named David, developing an app to help refugees navigate government services. He had faced 15 rejections and was questioning whether his idea was commercially viable. "I keep hearing that the refugee market is too small and complex," David told her. "But I know this could help thousands of families struggling with language barriers and systems they don't understand." "How do you know when to keep going versus when to pivot?" Sarah recognized the discouragement in David's voice. The same doubt that had plagued her during rejection seasons. "When you think about giving up," she said, "what bothers you most? That you might fail? Or that those families will continue struggling without a solution?" David's answer came immediately. "The families, I can find other work, but they need help now." "Then you have your answer," Sarah replied. "If your vision is primarily about solving a problem that matters, rather than just building a successful business, then you keep going until God opens the right doors. But you have to be willing to surrender control of how and when those doors open." 6 months later, David contacted Sarah to tell her his app was being piloted by 3 refugee resettlement organizations and had received funding from a foundation specializing in immigrant services. His breakthrough had come not through traditional investors, but through a nonprofit conference where he met someone whose brother worked in refugee services. "Another wrong number story," David said, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. As Sarah drove home that evening, passing the exit for Sunset Manor where her journey had taken its crucial turn, she thought about the seniors using her app at that moment to connect with family members. The families, including elderly relatives in digital activities they had previously been excluded from, and retirement communities implementing technology programs they never could have imagined. She also thought about Margaret, who had become not just a client but a friend and advisor. Margaret often reminded her that the wrong number call hadn't been wrong at all. It had been the answer to prayers. Both had been praying without knowing the other existed. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandmother, Mia. "I just video called your cousin in Mexico using your app. She said her children want to learn English, and I'm going to teach them some words every week. Thank you for not giving up on old people like me." Sarah smiled, remembering the afternoon 3.5 years earlier when she had first imagined an app helping people like Abuela Carmen navigate technology with dignity. The vision had been accurate from the beginning, but the path to fulfillment had required surrender of control she never could have anticipated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve seniors needing technological bridges to maintain family and community connections, new chances to demonstrate that business success could be measured not just in profit margins, but in restored relationships and renewed dignity. But tonight, Sarah was content to rest in the knowledge that when God is your doorkeeper, closed doors are never the end of the story. They're just preparation for doors that will open in ways you never could have imagined. At times you never could have planned. Through connections you never could have made on your own. The iron gates that had seemed so immovable had opened of their own accord. Just as they always do, when divine timing intersects with human faithfulness. When surrender replaces striving. And when heaven's purposes align with earth's persistence. As Pastor Joel Osteen teaches, closed doors really can't stop you when God has a plan. Sarah's story had become living proof of that promise. But more than that, it had become a bridge, helping others cross from their own seasons of rejection into breakthrough, waiting on the other side of surrender. The woman behind the iron gate had discovered the gate was never locked at all. It had just been waiting for the right moment to swing wide and reveal the destiny that had been prepared for her all along.